Hello, welcome to the Code of Honor podcast. I'm your host, Kiley. I'm joined by my wonderful, esteemed co-host, Kyle. Kyle, how are you?
Having a great weekend, Kylie. It was a heck of a week in the world of the smushed together world of ROH and AEW.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot going on, and it wasn't all ROH specific, but I think the standing of ROH is starting to be solidified, and I think we're starting to get a better picture of how ROH and AEW are going to blend together. And honestly, I kind of like it. On this week, we have a star-making performance by Wheeler Yuta. And I have so many thoughts about this match. I thought this was the best I've seen Wheeler Yuta by far, especially in AEW. I think he's a wonderful champion. I think Tony Khan made the right choice giving him that belt back at Supercard of Honor. What did you think?
First of all, I love Josh Woods. No shade to him whatsoever. We're both big fans. But Wheeler Yuta had so much going for him already with his teasing with the Blackpool Combat Club, with the tension with Best Friends. This was such a great catalyst for him to continue to move forward in that story and to show Bryan Danielson specifically as a former pure champion. Here's what I bring to the table, And William Regal made mention of that you impressed me, you've impressed Brian. Now you need to impress the hardest guy to impress. Now you need to impress John. And Wheeler took it right to him from the opening bell.
Yeah, and it really brought me back to the early days of the Bryan Danielson-John Moxley feud, where John Moxley said, "I'll never team with someone unless I bled with it." And Wheeler Yuta, he bled in this match. This was, from the get-go, this was violent. This was a very much a John Moxley style match, but there was technical elements in it because it's Wheeler Yuta. And I just want to know, Kyle, now that Wheeler Yuta, who is a champion in Ring of Honor, is presumably now a member of the Blackpool Combat Club, is your Bryan Danielson alarm going off? Your Bryan Danielson and Ring of Honor alarm?
It's inching closer. And Wheeler did change his Twitter bio to mention Blackpool Combat Club, so it's Twitter bio official now. So
that's as official as it gets.
It's true. I wasn't technically a host of this show until I put it in my bio. Now this was tremendous. I think it is moving towards Bryan Danielson in ROH. I don't know if there's a set timetable for that. I feel like that's a trump card that Tony could pull just about any time he wanted and make it make sense. So I don't think there's necessarily a need to rush it. But it would not shock me to see it happen at any time. This one, I will go so far as to say this was John Moxley's best match in AEW. I will go that far.
That's a bold statement.
I will go that far.
That's a bold statement. Okay.
It had the story behind it. It had the technical acumen behind it that Moxley versus Kingston, for instance, did not have, even though that had the story. It had some of the brawling element. It blended the two so seamlessly in a way that Moxley and Omega, I don't think, really did. Maybe his one-on-one with Danielson, but I'm going to put the one with Wheeler Yuta just a step higher. I think Wheeler Yuta and John Moxley was Moxley's best match in AEW. It told an amazing story. Wheeler, drawing BCC on his chest in his own blood after the match, and shaking hands and celebrating with Danielson and Regal, and Moxley even sort of giving him the sort of gruff congratulations that John Moxley does and says, now the real work begins, because that's just who John Moxley is. And John and Renee now have another adopted kid. I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you saw Excalibur's tweet. I don't know if you saw Excalibur's tweet after the show. Something to the effect of, attention. He tagged Renee, and he said, "Please take care of your new son. He doesn't eat much, but he just lost a lot of blood."
I love that. I love Wheeler Yuta. I love Renee. They, you know what? They can do whatever they want to do, and I'll support them.
You know what?
I
As
also
soon as
thought
Shooter comes back over from England and the whole family can be back together again.
Shooter. never forget. That was sort of the best things in wrestling at the time. But going back to the match, I thought
Yeah.
John Moxley's reaction at the end, the way that he sold Wheeler Yuta's performance. John Moxley won. He choked Wheeler Yuta out. But I think his reaction at the end was really telling, because we don't see John Moxley look at people that way a lot, that he's like shocked by their toughness or their ability. He's never in that position. So I thought that was really interesting. And I'm wondering where the story goes from here, because Wheeler Yuta is a champion in ROH. These are AEW talent, but I guess we're going to get a shared universe, at least ROH people going into AEW. We haven't seen much of the other way since Supercard of Honor. But I'm really looking forward to seeing Wheeler Yuta on ROH TV, which is presumably happening soon.
Yeah.
And I would love to see John Moxley there. I mean, everybody's Bryan Danielson and Jonathan Gresham, which Jonathan Gresham, by all reports, is pretty much AW bound. That's the match everybody wants. But John Moxley, I think there's some dream matches for him in ROH, though.
100%. I still don't know if the Briscoes are going to be a thing in ROH moving forward. We'll probably get into that when we talk about the roster construction a little bit later in this show. But one-on-one against Jay Briscoe.
That would be so good.
And
these are the kind of things you can do when you have a roster like the AEW's roster.
Or Moxley and Danielson against the Briscoes would be
100%.
Lights out amazing. You know, there's so much fun you can have with that. As far as the future for Wheeler Yuta, I would say I think you're going to need to see him pick up at least a couple of marquee wins in AEW. I think he'll split time, because he still really doesn't have that marquee singles win. I think you clean up his angle with Best Friends. You put him. I think he beats Trent Beretta to put a capper on that. And I think he goes on a run in ROH defending the Pure title. I think you see a sort of almost, I don't think it's not proper to compare him to Joe, obviously, but that's the Pure reign that comes to mind for me, because Nigel's reign was more about technical chicanery. And yes, he was a fabulous technical wrestler, but he found increasingly ridiculous ways to cheat. And that doesn't feel like where Wheeler's going. It feels like Wheeler's going in a technical mindset, but in a much more brutal fashion with his involvement with Blackpool Combat Club. So I feel like the closest comparison I can think is Joe, who had the pure chops, but would also just beat the daylights out of you with pure chops. But something along that line, and I feel like he starts racking up wins there to continue to build him up in that capacity.
Yeah, I think whatever they do with Wheeler Yuta will set the tone for ROH, AEW, whatever shared universe situation they have going on. I think the AEW fans are really going to push for him to be on Dynamite and Rampage, just because the reactions he got during the Moxley match were insane, and the Yuta chants. I am worried that the title will become lost in the shuffle, especially with the TNT title, which is Wheeler Yuta's not even close to that in terms of stories. Yeah. But I am concerned that eventually there will be sort of friction between those two titles. And, I think Tony Khan can resolve it. I trust him completely as a booker. But if you're going to have Wheeler Yuta on AEW TV, it has to have a lot of meaning just because of that. You can't just throw him into meaningless stories.
Yeah. And obviously with ROH tag titles being defended on this episode, as we saw, word breaking next week about Minoru Suzuki defending the ROH television title against Samoa Joe, of all people. Are you kidding me with these dream matches? So obviously there's a willingness to defend ROH titles on AEW television, but the Pure title is such a unique animal in the wrestling ecosystem that I genuinely don't know if that will fly on AEW programming or not. I would almost like to have, if you're going to do ROH defenses, I would almost like to bring in Ian Riccaboni.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally Ian and Caprice, but get people acclimated to all of these trappings of Ring of Honor, in one shot, kind of thing. But I guess we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me to see a pure title defense on TV. I would almost rather it stick to ROH television, but
yeah, and I don't know if we'll see one on Dynamite right away. I think they might put one on Rampage to test the waters, because there's definitely a lot of people in AEW that would do really, really well with that. I just, like I said, I don't want Ring of Honor to be sort of lost in the shuffle, and I don't want it to be seen as something secondary to everything happening in AEW. Just because these titles have such a long lineage and they're so prestigious, I think they can add a lot of value to AEW, like we saw with the FTR and the Young Bucks match, and everything that went on there, which we'll talk about in a bit because we're getting there. But transitioning away from Wheeler Yuta, but not from Ring of Honor, Willow Nightingale, who we saw at Supercard and who has been sort of placed in this ROH universe, which we don't know the roster, but she was in a Owen Hart tournament qualifying match against Red Velvet. And this was really interesting to me because the crowd was chanting for Willow. They were chanting, and Red Velvet, she's an AEW staple in the women's division. She's always sort of around. She's in everything. And by all accounts, people like her and they cheer for Red Velvet, but they were chanting for Willow and they were booing Red Velvet when she beat Willow.
Willow was over.
It was crazy to me. And how do you not sign Willow after that?
Part of me is genuinely shocked that they almost didn't call an audible with it.
Yeah, especially for Red Velvet.
There's a part of me that goes, man, and I feel like that. I feel like Willow is made at this point. She's good. She's going to land somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be ROH or it's going to be AEW, but she is going to land somewhere because say what you will about Tony as a booker, as a person, as whatever, I don't know. There's a whole lot of discourse there, be that as it may. He's not stupid. Mm-hmm. He's got ears. He clearly can see what's happening here. And Willow is crazy over. She's talented. She's an amazing natural baby face. She is just so good at what she does. And how do you not sign her and make her the face of your division?
I don't know. And it's like Willow is made for TV. I feel like everything she does is so perfectly designed to entertain a TV crowd. And going back to the discussion of the Ring of Honor roster and sort of building our roster from here, if Willow isn't going to be on AWTV, I would love to see her in Ring of Honor just because I think she has that star potential. And looking at the available female talent for the Ring of Honor women's division, there's no bigger stars than Willow.
No.
Especially with those reactions she got, because that was insane. We never, ever see that for women who are brought into AEW, I should say. Women who are brought in for these sort of tournament matches or squash matches or, whatever it is that Tony's bringing women in for besides signing them. And this is a great opportunity for, Mercedes Martinez. She's interim champion. She's facing Deonna Purrazzo down the line. But Willow, she's a prime challenger. Granted, she just lost, but I don't know. I think if you're going to have a Ring of Honor women's division, it has to be Willow. I don't think there's anyone else.
No, I hard agree. I would suggest that the presumption is that Mercedes is going to beat Deonna Purrazzo whenever that happens. I haven't heard an official announcement as to when that's happening yet.
I haven't either.
But I think if you're keeping roughly a similar major event schedule to what you've had prior to the hiatus, then sometime around Death Before Dishonor, which is probably usually sometime in late June or so, or maybe Glory by Honor, which is getting into August or September, right? And I wouldn't even wait as far as Glory by Honor, but around Death Before Dishonor weekend, pull the trigger, make Willow the babyface of your division, and just go.
Yeah, because, and here's the thing, if judging by Supercard of Honor and the pay-per-view buys that it did, there's a clear, willingness of AEW fans to try Ring of Honor. I think that's undeniable. But Willow is a star in AEW. I mean, the crowd loved her, and then the Twitter reaction was insane. People love Willow. So if you're going to try to, funnel these AEW fans into Ring of Honor, you need people like that and big crossover stars. And you can't just rely on, Bryan Danielson going into Ring of Honor and doing a program. You need someone who can be there and can be a staple in Ring of Honor, like Willow, like the Briscoes, which I don't know if the Briscoes are going to be there, but like Wheeler Yuta, fingers crossed for the Briscoes, honestly. Like Wheeler Yuta, like all these guys. And, going back to the point of roster building, we don't have a whole lot of information yet, which is concerning because there's TV tapings and there's stuff happening and we don't know who's there, who's doing what. But, I'll give Tony the benefit of the doubt on that one. As much as I would love to have a full, clean roster, here's everyone we have. Yeah. But I think Willow is a definite bet. I think Wheeler Yuta. I think you could take a lot of the people in AEW and put them in there for a short period of time. But I also think you should look at signing people like Shazza McKenzie, these sort of female free agents who have been, out of the country because of COVID, or they haven't really worked a lot because of COVID, and putting them in Ring of Honor. And really letting them, hone their craft and really work on their abilities there. Not that I think ROH should be, a training ground for AEW, but I think this is where we can really maximize the crossover between them.
I mean, and we both talk about we don't want ROH to be perceived as the minor leagues or the building blocks or anything like that. But at the same time, if you look back at Ring of Honor's history, in many ways, that's kind of what they were. They were always taking people that didn't get seen as the stars they could be for whatever reason, giving them a platform, letting them wow the world, and in a lot of cases, move on to greener pastures, and then the next crop would come right in, and it operated like that for several years. And there's so many women out there right now. Athena is still not signed with anybody. She's still floating around out there. Nixon Newell is still floating around out there. Session Moth Martina is still floating around. She used to run a couple of dates on Dark for AEW. She was getting over in ROH before the hiatus.
Yeah.
And Trish Adora is still out there. Allison Kay and Marty Bell, the Hex, are working with NWA right now. I mean, we could keep going.
there's a lot of great female talent out there. There's a lot of great, male talent as well. I think. And I'm not sure what the plan is for ROH. At this point, because there's so few roster announcements, besides, I guess you could say Samoa Joe, kind of, because he was there, and then we got Samoa Joe as All Elite. I guess you could kind of say that it's a roster announcement. I'm wondering if ROH is just going to have a lot of people on short-term deals, like they kind of do. In AEW, they have people who work a little bit and then they're gone, or they come back, or what have you, which is not something I necessarily want. I don't want people to just come in and then leave, because I don't know, you can't really get a solid ground there. But I think we could get a lot of really interesting matchups with it, a lot of dream matches, especially, bringing people in from AEW. And Tony Khan did say, forgive me, I don't know where, maybe someone else knows, maybe on Busted Open Radio, he's always there, that he wants to sort of get back to the roots of AEW when it was very, very hot and they had a lot of big angles and big matches. And it was very well booked, and it was like every week felt, amazing. And I think we could do something like that with ROH if we're constantly cycling people in instead of having, a small roster, which admittedly would probably be a small roster if we only had permanent talent.
Yeah. And there's a genuine question to be had as to whether or not ROH is going to be a contracting entity to itself at all, or if these will just all be AEW contracted talent, and they'll just, sort of like sort of like a Major League Baseball situation where they just kind of get sent to, go work over here for a while kind of thing. When we don't know. Assuming the first TV taping is going to go on as scheduled, that was set for April 16th. So maybe next Friday we'll have some kind of this coming Friday we'll have some kind of an answer as to what that might look like, who's at the TV taping, what's happening. Beyond that, we have a few things. We have Tully Blanchard Enterprises. We have
which
Khan.
I'm really enjoying.
We have Khan. We have Leona. We have Brian Cage.
Mm-hmm.
They brought back Shinobi Shadow Squad. So, we had Cheeseburger, and we had, who is apparently no longer world famous CB. He's still world famous to us, but,
Once you have a name like Cheeseburger, I feel like it's kind of hard to move on from that.
Well, so there's definitely, it's true. There's definitely some people here. Obviously, Jonathan Gresham is going to be a thing. I don't know if he's going to ever be signed by AEW proper and then, sent over or what have you, how that's going to work. Hopefully there's still a place for Bandito. He crushed it. I was disappointed that we didn't hear anything from Roosh, that we didn't hear anything from The Righteous.
Yeah.
Dalton Castle was booked, but we don't know. The Briscoes were booked, but we don't know. Joe Hendry was booked, but we don't know.
And that's really the crux of the problem, isn't it? We don't know anything. Like, we could speculate all day, but it's like, we need someone to be transparent up front. Like, you can't just buy a promotion and then just not talk about it after a show that they did, what was it, 20,000 pay-per-view buys?
Yes.
Which was far beyond anyone's expectations. So, are we just hot right now?
And was widely considered... And it was widely considered one of, if not the best shows of WrestleMania weekend. It drew remarkably high praise from all corners. So like you said earlier about AEW fans being willing to check it out, between FTR winning the ROH tag titles, Joe and the ROH TV title being defended on television on AEW on Wednesday with Minoru Suzuki, there's buzz and there's eyeballs around ROH for the first time in a while, and they hit it out of the park. So one would really think you'd be chomping at the bit to capitalize on that.
My hope is that next week we get some big announcements, because it is like Tony Khan to sort of sit on things and not talk about them and then just pull them out randomly on Twitter. So my hope is that something like that happens and we do get anything, because I would hate to go into TV tapings and find out all my news from Fightful Select, which I love Sean Ross Sapp. Fightful is great. But I would love to have something official and concrete so that we can say on our podcast, here's what TV tapings, here's everyone that was there. But I don't know. Yeah, watch Demo Divas. Demo Divas is great. It's on Fightful Overbooked. It's a good show.
We'll get to those plugs at the end. So
yeah, we'll plug at the end.
If memory serves, I feel like there was a tag title match this week. It was probably kind of forgettable. It probably wasn't a huge deal, but
for a second, and I don't know why I thought this. For a second, I was like, was there? But there was. It was like one of the best, TV tag team matches probably ever. I thought it was 5 stars. Dave Meltzer disagreed, but so FTR, Young Bucks, winner takes all. Okay, that's our gimmicks.
First of all, it's forgetful, and second of all, she's unforgettable. So,
best co-host ever, Kyle Sparks. Follow him on Twitter. That's FTR and the Young Bucks. I thought it was an incredible match. I think FTR coming out of that match with the Briscoes, which to me was an all-time classic, probably my favorite tag team match ever. FTR and the Briscoes. Presumably they're sore, they're beat up. It is, they come to Dynamite, they wrestle the Young Bucks, they put on another classic. FTR is on the run of their lives, a legendary run. I thought this match was superior to their first match. I liked the dynamic a lot more of FTR as, these emerging baby faces, and Young Bucks, these heels that we've, been annoyed with and despised for months. and FTR retained, and I think that was the right choice. And I'm so excited for this FTR run, especially if they're going to be in ROH.
Yeah, this was so good from the word go, from the fact that we brought in Bobby Cruise to handle the ring announcements. You know, first of all, that's just amazing. I'm always on board for hearing the voice of Bobby Cruise. He is so good at what he does. Then we had an amazing match. The only thing that kept it from being fully ROH for me was, and I said this on Twitter, I know the Bucks work with Rick Knox. That's just their thing. It's what they do. Paul Turner's right there backstage. Long-time ROH official. You could have done that for just this one match.
That's true.
It wouldn't have added a thing. But for weirdos like me, it would have been that one little extra bit of, oh wow, look at that. That would have popped me. But that didn't take away from my, maybe that's why Meltzer took away a quarter star. I don't know. But the match itself was there. I run out of superlatives. It was so good in every way. The FTR are turning into such great babyface champions, which I didn't really see coming. They're turning babyface just on the strength of being so good at professional wrestling that you can't hate them.
I love it.
Dax is taking all of the Bret Hart mannerisms. Matt is even picking up on that, by the way. At one point, Matt hit, I forget what kind of an offensive maneuver, and like did the Bret Hart pose, to the point where Dax is trying to charge the ring to get at him for daring to mock Bret Hart. And
it's the little things with these guys. And yes. FTR, I think they've always been incredible. They were incredible in WWE as the Revival. They're incredible in AEW. There's something special about what they're doing right now. And they really owe it to, the Forbidden Door and being able to do all these things that they're doing. And you mentioned Dax Harwood. I think looking back at FTR, Cash has always kind of been, the crowd favorite. People have always gravitated towards him more because he's a little more athletic. He can do a little more of the popular, like flippy things, that sort of stuff. But I think Dax, this is the height of his popularity thus far. And I think people are really getting behind him as this Bret Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, like, love child. Dax Harwood, who does all these super unique things. He's super old school, but he does this character work that's edgy, and he's mean on Twitter, but then he's so passionate about what he does that you can't be mad at him about it for being mean about professional wrestling. And there's nothing like it in this match. It didn't feel Ring of Honor to me. It felt very much an AEW match, which it's AEW, so I'm not going to count that against them. I want to see this match in ROH again. Like I want the Young Bucks to go. I wasn't sold on it on the Super Card of Honor post show. I don't know, but I didn't want the Young Bucks there. But this match, I'm like, you know what? The Young Bucks can go to ROH and they can wrestle FTR there, and they can wrestle the Briscoes again. Fingers crossed. And to me, the big money match, which I don't think it'll be in ROH, it'll probably be somewhere else, is FTR versus Motor City Machine Guns. And people are saying this on Twitter, and the discourse has been sort of back and forth. But what do you think about that?
I love me some Alex Shelley.
I know you do.
we were talking before the show that I'm, making noise about taking a 4-hour drive to a show on no other knowledge than the fact that Alex Shelley is going to be there. So I'm a huge fan of his and have been for a while. And I'm a huge fan of what he's done in ROH. The Machine Guns have had bangers against the Bucks, against the Briscoes, against a wide variety of teams. And Shelley has his fingerprints all over modern wrestling. There are so many guys that do little things that he's done and little things that he's influenced. And that match would be lights out. take my money now. I will hand you a blank check. Give me FTR and the machine guns. I don't even care where.
Honestly, at this point, I'm on the same boat. You know, back when, you know, Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor, I was very much a, you know, ROH purist. I was like, you know, I want ROH to be completely separate. I don't want any crossover. I don't want AEW in my ROH because these are two, you know, definitely two different promotions. But now I'm like, I'm living for the Forbidden Door. I love this FTR crossover. I love Wheeler Yuta. I love Mercedes. I'm really enjoying this. And I think Tony Khan, you know, my gripes with, you know, the lack of transparency and sort of the nothingness that's happened, I think he's doing a really good job with it under the circumstances. And FTR is the ultimate symbol of that for me. I am so in love with this FTR run. I could talk for ages about it.
Well, the matches are going to continue to be fantastic. I mean, like we've barely glossed over it, and we'll probably talk about it more next week. But you know, he's delivering Minoru Suzuki versus Samoa Joe. Imagine being told a year ago that not only would that, or 2 years ago, or whatever, that not only would that match happen, but it would happen on free TV.
Yeah, and imagine that. Okay, it's happening. Samoa Joe is All Elite. Minoru Suzuki works for New Japan. But the show is happening on AEW Dynamite, and it's for an ROH title. It's like there's nothing better than wrestling as it currently is, and it's basically because everyone is just kind of floating around and everyone's working together, you know, except for, you know, WWE. But I'm not holding my breath for that one.
Well, yeah, and
sorry, go ahead.
The yeah, it's wild. The matches are going to continue to be amazing, but at some point, and I hate to be the wet blanket about this, I would really like to see ROH have its own identity. Yeah. And I'm remaining hopeful that the TV tapings will start to do that and will start to separate things a little bit. But you know, for the time being, I'm enjoying the ride.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Tony is going to bring in a lot of newer talent into ROH at the TV tapings, and maybe it's just a matter of time and sort of building up a roster the same way he did in AEW with the Pillars, and then I guess you could call them the Pillars Part 2, which Wheeler Yuta is a part of. And honestly, that's just speculation. I really don't know. I would like to see him bring in a lot more of the ROH, you know, lifers, ROH mainstays. But I don't know. It is what it is. But this FTR Young Bucks match, if this is what we're gonna get going forward in the All Elite, you know, metaverse with these two promotions, I'm here for it. I'll never turn down a 5-star match ever.
Ooh, Willow is a pillar. Okay, that is not one that I'd seen. The usual version of the pillars that I remember seeing is Wheeler, Moriarty, Garcia, and God, I'm forgetting who the fourth was that I always saw in that list.
Oh, Hook.
Yes.
Hook. Oh, and
Dante Martin, he'd be a decent one too. I'm still waiting for all of Danhausen's curses to catch Hook all at once. Like he's trying to curse him over and over and over and over again. And then it finally catches and he gets a really, really, really bad curse all at once. And like
I'd love
Danhausen pins him in his first AEW match.
That's another one. I'm wearing a Danhausen shirt right now, by the way.
Very nice, very evil.
Danhausen, I would love to see him in ROH again. I would love to see Hook there. That you could totally do that match at ROH, and it definitely wouldn't affect Hook's, you know, demeanor in AEW, for lack of a better word. Danhausen is just such a special talent. There's no one, and if anyone ever tried to do what Danhausen does, they would be ridiculed for it. People would hate it. It's like a once in a generation sort of thing.
Yeah. It's so now that was we're hopeful. Well, it's the best we can say. We're hopeful, but make sure you're watching with us, make sure you're on the podcast with us. And this is just going to be my other gimmick. Apparently I'm just going to have a whole bunch of gimmicks and a whole bunch of catchphrases and things, and I'm just going to say join us on this ride. It's going to be fun. Like, the matches are already fantastic. And you can find out along with us.
Yeah, it's going to be good. At this point, I don't think there's any way ROH could be bad. Even if it's AW developmental, I think the matches will always be brilliant just because the type of talent that would be there would be brilliant.
Yes.
But Kyle, I know you wanted to have our history moment. You wanted to have a history segment.
That's so unlike me.
Here we go, Kyle. Tell us about your favorite ROH tag title match.
Yeah, well, it was something that we discussed going into this week for the uninitiated, that, since we're obviously talking about FTR and the Bucks and coming off the heels of FTR and the Briscoes being two of the best, if not the best, ROH tag title matches of all time, I thought that between the two of us, we could come up with a couple of fun matches to recommend and that people could go check out on Honor Club or whatever equivalent, and however they could find it. I'm not gonna encourage any of that nonsense, but the match that I came up with was from the 4th anniversary show back in 2006. Austin Aries and Roderick Strong defended the ROH tag titles against the team of AJ Styles and Matt Seidel. Now, the history going into this was that Seidel had joined Generation Next in the summer of 2005 as they were feuding with the Embassy, because obviously Generation Next had turfed Alex Shelley back at Final Battle 04, and they were a 3-man unit at that point. They were Austin Aries, Roderick Strong, Jack Evans. As they got into the feud with the Embassy, they needed another body to help stem the tide. So they brought in the summer of 05, Matt Seidel, who was only about a 5-year pro at that point and was just an absurd high flyer who could also wrestle with a great technical acumen for his age and his experience level, and was a great fit. At Final Battle 05, Aries and Strong unseated Sal Renaro and Tony Mamaluke to win the ROH tag team titles. And a few weeks later, at Hell Freezes Over in January of 06, AJ Styles and Matt Seidel met one-on-one and had an absolute lights-out match. They went out and crushed it, as you would expect 2005 AJ Styles to do with just about anybody. Matt Seidel more than held up his end of the bargain, came up just short. AJ picks up the win with the Styles Clash. After the match, AJ Styles gets on the microphone, suggests to Seidel, hey, let's go after the tag titles, even though the tag titles are currently held by Seidel's stablemates in Generation Next. Seidel, being a young babyface and therefore very dumb, because let's face it, all good babyfaces are a little bit dense. That's kind of the mark of a good babyface. Decides, yeah, what could possibly go wrong with this? In a response of uncharacteristic kindness out of Aries, he said, okay, I'm not going to stand in your way. You want to come after the belts, come after them, but we're not going to hold back on you. We'll beat you up like anybody else. So it happened at 4th anniversary show, at main evented 4th anniversary show, and just a phenomenal match from start to finish. It was everything you'd expect. Aries and Strong are as a team are as good as they ever were. Double teams are crisp. Everything hits. Seidel hits his top rope moonsault to the outside on nothing but concrete and still lands it picture perfect on his feet. It's everything you'd expect out of an ROH main event from 2005, 2006 in that sense.
So it was absolutely insane.
Oh my God. The last 10 minutes are bodies flying everywhere. Styles hits the Styles Clash on Strong. Aries breaks it up with a nasty kick to the face. Takes out AJ. They pin Seidel with I think the backbreaker into the 450 that they were using at the time. Retain the titles, but just a tremendous match start to finish, and one that the whole 4th anniversary show is worth checking out. The whole Milestone series from around that time is just such good TV. It's in the midst of the CZW invasion, so that was still happening. So that was a whole portion of things that was going on. And the CZW invasion also ties into Aries and Strong's eventual losing of the titles, because around the time that the CZW feud ended, the tag title belts mysteriously disappeared, only for Chris Hero to reveal on LiveJournal, because again, this was 2006, that he and Claudio had stolen the tag title belts, and if Aries and Strong wanted to get them back, they were going to challenge for them at, I believe it was Glory by Honor in that September. The Kings of Wrestling won the match and the titles, and therefore Chris Hero earned himself an ROH contract, which was how the hated first CZW Invader became a member of the roster. So that was a little bit of an unnecessary addition at the end, but I love the way all this flows together in ROH history. I love the way they always did that with their storytelling. And look up the show, look up the match. It's tremendous, and you won't regret it.
I definitely love the history lesson. Kyle, if you don't know, if you haven't seen this before, is our resident historian. And if you ask him anything about ROH, he's going to know it. Like, he just knows it all. Somehow, it's all up there in his brain. So, I knew that Kyle was going to do something a little bit older. So,
I'm intrigued because I don't know what you're going to choose. We said that we talked about this before the show, and I said I don't want to know what you're going to choose. I want to be surprised.
Okay, so I was like, okay, I'm going to pick something that, maybe people will, relate to a little more in the current climate of wrestling, which I think yours, of course, does, because all those guys are amazing. But, so I got to go Young Bucks, right? Young Bucks, ROH, they're legends. But which Young Bucks match? The first one that comes to mind is 2018, Young Bucks, who just became heavyweights in Japan. They're IWGP champions, tag champions, against the Briscoes, who are ROH champions. That match, I think, is a 5-star classic. I don't know what Dave Meltzer rated it. I'm sorry. Probably 5 stars, I would say. Then you also have, Young Bucks versus Briscoes versus SCU, which I think was in the same year, that ladder match.
Yes.
And I was just kind of running through all these matches, but I have to settle on Young Bucks versus the Briscoes. As basic as it might be, it was 2018, Young Bucks Briscoes, and the Briscoes beat the Young Bucks. The ROH champions beat the IWGP champions, which at the time, if you weren't watching, New Japan ROH at the time, that was a really big deal. Like, that never ever ever happened. It was always New Japan people beating ROH people.
Yeah.
So the match was incredible. Of course, the Young Bucks and Briscoes, they worked together a million times. They have great chemistry. The Young Bucks at this time were kind of in the midst of their Bullet Club breakup, when the Elite were sort of going out and doing all their YouTube shows, and Cody was there and Marty Scurll was there, and all these guys were there. And it was really the peak of the Elite before AEW. So they came into the match with all this momentum and this motivation, and they were like, oh, we're going to beat the Briscoes super easy. We're heavyweights now. We're the best, whatever. Because the Young Bucks, up until this point, had been really fighting to be heavyweights in Japan, because weight is a big thing in New Japan. So the Briscoes come in. They're fired up. 4.25 stars. Dave?
Boo.
Let's hear. Boo. But back to the match. So the Briscoes come in. They're like, we're not the same Briscoes as we were. We're better. ROH is better. ROH can compete with New Japan. And the whole match was sort of centered on this idea that the Young Bucks are high and mighty. And the match was great, of course. You can talk ad nauseum about the spots. I think the Briscoes really stepped out and sort of showed their uniqueness in this match, more so than the Young Bucks. Which, if you haven't seen the Briscoes, go back and watch Briscoe stuff, because you're really missing out. Briscoes, Young Bucks, Briscoes, SCU, Briscoes anyone. They're always good. But it was best in the world 2018. I think it was best in the world.
Yes.
I think it's on Honor Club. Kyle would probably know, our resident Honor Club expert too.
I'm pretty sure that it is 2018. I think last I knew, I think it was there, but I haven't checked, that year recently. You usually find me hanging out in like 05, 06, 08.
Well, I had another one, just because this match is not necessarily like a ROH classic by any means, but it was one of the first ROH matches that I remember. 2006 is ROH's best year. Remember, this match I'm talking about is not from 2006. It's from 2007. My apologies. So I don't remember where I watched this match. I must have watched it on a DVD at some point. I don't really remember. But again, it's the Briscoes. Sorry. But so back in the day, there was a wrestler named Tyler Black in ROH who is now Seth Rollins, and he teamed with Jimmy Jacobs, who a lot of you probably don't know if you're not big ROH fans or you're big like wrestling history.
Oh, I'll turn you guys into fans of Jimmy Jacobs. Let me tell you.
So I'm really interested if you remember this match. So it was for the ROH World Tag Team titles. So it was Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, who were called the Age of the Fall. They beat the Briscoes. They won the titles. It was that Final Battle 2007. Somewhere in New York, Manhattan, probably Manhattan. But I remember really, really enjoying this match because in 2007, I was sort of in the thick of my ROH love because I was one of the few people who had access to ROH on TV. And I really, really loved Jimmy Jacobs. And to me, this match was sort of, it was a Jimmy Jacobs showcase. The Briscoes were great. Oh, it was the Manhattan Center. But the Briscoes were great too, of course. Tyler Black was always great, but he wasn't my dude like Jimmy Jacobs was. And the Age of the Fall was always great. And their title run didn't last that long, if I remember correctly. It was like a month or two. It wasn't that long.
It wasn't very long. It was only about 2 months at most.
Which, is a shame. But I had to give this match an honorable mention just because I remember looking back at the way I felt about Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black and sort of the chemistry they had and sort of the attachment that I held to them in a weird childlike way. I really looked up to them, and they did have some great matches. Yeah. And if you look back, some of the people who were in ROH at that time, as much as 2006 was ROH's best year, which you could argue 2006, but a lot of the people who were there at the same time, you had the Briscoes, you had BJ Whitmer and Brent Albright, you had Jack Evans and Jigsaw, Austin Aries and Bryan Danielson, all these sort of guys. So tag team wrestling in ROH in 2007 was not dead, even if 2006, you argue, is the best year. And you know what? Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black were at the forefront of that. And I will forever stand by their matches, as much as people love to go back and critique them and poke fun at them. The real people know what's up.
Yes. And I'm trying to think now, and I believe that was the match that Age of the Fall won at Final Battle that year.
Yes.
And
they beat the Briscoes.
Was that the match that, and I distinctly remember one where, I don't remember if it was that match or not. The Briscoes went for the Springboard Doomsday device, and Jacobs caught Mark in the End Times guillotine choke as he rolled backwards off of Jay's shoulders. And I want to say that was the finish.
I think it was.
I distinctly remember that spot, and it was just like, it was such a mind-blowing thing at the time. Like, she did not just do that.
Yeah, nowadays it would be a spot and people would move on for him. But back in the day, when people did stuff like that.
Yeah, this was almost 15 years ago, guys.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and it was revolutionary. And you know what? All these young guys who do all this sort of stuff, you really owe it to ROH at this time period. And I will forever stand by ROH being the pioneers of modern wrestling.
Oh, at some point I've already done deep dive feature writing for other sites about like the Jimmy Jacobs and Lacey angle, I've talked about that on this show before. That whole angle of the rise of the Age of the Fall and Jimmy Jacobs' tenure in ROH is just, it's such a good story from beginning to end. And I don't have enough good things to say. I really don't. He was so good at what he did. And if he was 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier, he would have been a star for decades in WWE. And that he was not is a shame.
Yeah, he was really one of the, in my opinion, one of the unsung heroes of modern wrestling. Like, there was the time period, which probably about 2005 to maybe like 2014 with the emergence of the Bullet Club, where a lot of wrestling was just kind of dead. Like, not a whole lot was going on. Of course, you know, you had indies and, you know, PWG experienced a resurgence, but Ring of Honor was really sort of, they kept that this style of wrestling and this sort of storytelling, you know, method, and this sort of tenacity and the character building and all the things you love about wrestling today. ROH really kept it alive, because it's undeniable at this point in time in North America, WWE was not doing its hottest. There was great matches during this period, don't get me wrong, but it's undeniable that WWE was at a low point during this period. So ROH was really where it was at. And, you know, you had TNA, which big fan, but I think everyone can admit it had its ups and it had its big downs. But Jimmy Jacobs was sort of the way he thought about wrestling, I think impacted the way his opponents thought about wrestling, which impacted the way their opponents thought about wrestling. And it's sort of a butterfly effect in a way that really changed the indies, that changed ROH, that changed into AEW and all these, you know, GCWs and all these promotions. And I think he's an unsung hero. You know what we need to do, Kyle? We need to do an episode where we have a whole segment that's just about him.
I'm sold. I let's not forget if we talk about, you know, telling stories and doing things and getting yourself over, that Jimmy went out and recorded the Ballad of Lacey on his own. It was just a thing that he did, and it turned into a 2-year, 3-year long story that ROH has gone back to and revisited at Supercard 9, I think, when when Jimmy had his last night in the company. GCW, I think, revisited it at Emo Fight. I think that was a GCW show. Yeah. You know, so it changed how a lot of the current generation, that story changed how a lot of the current generation, you know, does wrestling and tells stories, because they grew up watching that.
And you know what? Now I'm so glad I brought up that match, because I was like, oh, it's not as good as the Young Bucks. But you know what? That led us to this Jimmy Jacobs tangent, and I'm grateful for it. But we're gonna have to put a pin in it, because if we're gonna do a segment about it, I don't want to give away everything right now. So closing thoughts on ROH tag titles history.
Yeah. It's always been a strength of the promotion. With FTR at the helm for who knows how long, I feel like it's going to continue to be. I would really like to see a continued focus on the tag division moving forward into the new era. We've only got a couple of tag teams we're really certain of on the roster at this point. Let's flesh that out, because you're dealing with a title history that includes the Briscoes, Jimmy Jacobs and Tyler Black, the Kings of Wrestling, Austin Aries and Roderick Strong, El Generico and Kevin Steen, the American Wolves, the Motor City Machine Guns, the Young Bucks. I don't know how this list is still going, but it is. So it only kind of feels right that the modern best tag team in the world is now the standard bearer for that division.
I definitely agree. I think if anyone's going to do tag team wrestling justice, it's going to be AEW. So I have full faith that this ROH AEW, you know, shared universe is going to work out successfully for the tag team division. Even if there's no other tag teams brought in, even if it's just AEW's division, we're going to get great matches. I can't really complain about that. moving forward, though, I would like more clarification on things. I want a roster. I want all these sort of things. But again, we're early days, and Kyle and I are both really, really excited for where ROH goes from here.
A little bit.
Just a little bit.
A little bit.
I'll do my plugs, and then Kyle can do his. You can follow me on Twitter at @Fuller_Kiley. I post everything I'm doing on there. I have some other outside stuff going on, so follow me on Twitter for that. You can see me on here on the Code of Honor podcast every Monday at 3. We'll talk ROH news, we'll talk history, anything relevant that's happening. You can see me on Fightful Overbooked every Sunday at 5 for Demo Divas. We talk all things women's wrestling, news, match reviews, everything that's happening in women's wrestling for the week. You can find that there. Also follow Code of Honor podcast on Twitter at Code of Honor Cast, where we'll post everything that we're doing for this podcast. And follow bodyslam.net on all your socials. And Kyle.
There you go.
There we go.
You can find me on Twitter at Kyle K Sparks. Oh, you took it down just so you can put your pop-up up. Come on now, you're killing me here. Follow me on Twitter at Kyle K Sparks. I'm usually live tweeting Dynamite, live tweeting Rampage.
He's very good at it.
You can get some previews as to some stuff that I'll probably talk about on the show because I have a one-track mind. It's getting close to the NFL draft. I'm a big Green Bay Packers fan, so I'm very excited about what's going on there. Just a lot of random stuff, but it's predominantly wrestling content. So if you're digging what you're hearing, follow me there. I'm here Mondays for Code of Honor Cast here on bodyslam.net. Follow at Code of Honor Cast on Twitter for all the latest from this. Somebody from the podcast team here will be trying to man that account to try to tweet out stuff as often as possible when it's happening on AEW. But we're all also live tweeting AEW on our own accounts, so it gets a little dodgy, but we make it work. And I don't have anything else to plug really, other than writing occasionally on bodyslam.net. So I'll just use the opportunity to say, follow Kiley, watch her stuff. Demo Divas is on Sunday at 5 p.m., 6 p.m. 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd blame time zones, but we're in the same one, so I can't say that. But yes, watch Kiley and all the cool stuff that she's doing. Follow bodyslam.net on all our socials, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you do social media, we're probably there. And hop on board. This has been a lot of fun so far. I'm digging the fact that we get to keep doing it, and I'm very excited for what the future of ROH holds. And if you ever have anything you want to ask either of us, whether it's trivia, whether it's suggestions for stuff you want to hear about on the show, whatever it might be, hit us up. We're always interested in talking ROH, and we'll see you next week.